After a year of grueling campaigning and almost a week of counting ballots, with a nation and a world on edge, we finally have the 46th president-elect and vice president-elect of these United States of America, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. But as Joe Biden said, some believe it's time for healing and working together as a nation. Others, on the progressive Democratic side, say it's time to be bold, like the Republicans, and forget about what they say. And let's move forward with our agenda. You're listening to State of the Water, and I'm your host, award-winning Dr. Eric Claville. And today we'll be discussing these and important issues on the presidential election show. But as always, we want to hear from you. So please call in 757-823-9110. That's 757-823-9110. Well, Spartan Nation, Hampton Roads, and the greater Virginia area, we've got our president. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris will walk into the White House on January 20th, 2021. They're going to come into a nation that's looking for hope once again, a nation that's reeling from a pandemic and economic downturn once again. And once again, the Democratic Party says we've got the answer. But we want to know, what are your thoughts about the election? What are your thoughts about all the absentee ballots that came in, about the grassroots organizing? And also, in general, what are your thoughts and optimism for the next 4 years? Do you believe that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris can do it? Do you believe that what has happened in the country in the last 4 years is maybe insurmountable just in 4 years? We've got a lot to talk about. But what I want to do is take a look back. Let's take a look at the road to 270. You know, we had a lot of talk about the Electoral College. We had a lot of talk about whether the president should be elected by popular vote. And at the end of the day, one thing that we showed is that our system of democracy works. You know, but with this being the case, I mean, just the amount of ballots that were cast, the amount of people that actually voted in this election. Right now, it stands at 145 million plus people that cast their ballots. Now, this can go up to 150 million. But I want you to think about that for a second before we get into all these issues of today. And we want to hear from you again, 757-823-9110, because we're getting ready to blaze new trails in this country. We want to know, what are your thoughts? Because it's really time for the people. This is the people's party, the people's time. So we want to know what's on your mind. But I want you to think about the amount of people that actually voted this time around. You know, there are a lot of individuals that voted and they said this was their first time voting ever. You know, you may know a lot of those individuals, and you may be one of those individuals. And if you are, I want to know what really caused you to come and vote this time. But even famous people and stars that we look at and idolize, you know, have said that, you know, they didn't vote, you know, during President Barack Obama's time. They didn't vote, you know, pre that, and didn't vote in the last election with Hillary Clinton. But this was the first time they voted because they felt that it was important to them to get out there and not sit on the sideline during this time period and go out and vote. To me, that speaks volumes to our system. That speaks volumes to the people of this country that say, you know, when things get out of whack, it's time for us to step up and make sure that it continues to move forward. But what about when things are not out of whack? What about when things are settled? It's still time to step up. But let's take a look at these battleground states. So at the end of the day, it was still a handful of states that decided this election. You had the states, the Midwestern states of Minnesota, Michigan, Ohio, and Pennsylvania that were extremely important in this election. And then you had a couple of states in the West, Nevada, Arizona, and Colorado. And then you had a couple of surprises, Georgia, Texas, and North Carolina, all these states being in play. And we're going to talk about Georgia in a minute because this is what took place in Georgia. Let me tell you, this represents the New South. You know, Atlanta is carrying that state, and what has been done in the state of Georgia, in the city of Atlanta, and the outlying areas just didn't happen magically. But this is something that took place over the course of time. And we're going to take a look back at the civil rights era and talk about how individuals work together toward a economic agenda as opposed to a racism agenda. But let's look at these states again. If we go back and when the numbers finally settle, the margin of victory in these states that Joe Biden won and the ones that President Trump's going to win, because he's going to win North Carolina, and he also won Texas. But the margin of victory was razor thin percentage-wise. You're talking 1% or less. Last time I looked at Georgia, it was 0.1, when it was trending that way. It's going to end up being a little bit more, maybe 0.5 or even close to 1%, but still 1%. That represents 20,000 votes in some states, 27,000 in other, 30,000 in states like Pennsylvania and the like that are fairly large. But that's a small margin. What does that tell us? That tells us that there are people that think that the policies of the President Trump, because he's still president until January 20th, 2021. There are people that believe that the policies of the president the last 4 years is the right way in the right direction for our country. Let that soak in for a moment. When you think about the amount of votes, 145 million so far, 70 million cast for the president, 75 million cast for now Joe Biden, the president-elect. 70 million people believe that this is the way to go and continue for our country. To me, that's alarming. But I want to hear from you. What do you think about that? Do you think the immigration policy that the president talked about is the way to go? Do you think that the way that our chief executive officer of the land and really leader of the free world and the voice of the world is the way to go? Do you think that's the direction that our president should normalize white supremacist groups and the like? And we're going to talk about that toward the end of the show, these white supremacist groups and the report that the FBI was sitting on because the president wouldn't allow it to come out. But that's alarming to me. Less than 1% or right at 1% in these battleground states. Now, we've got states that we knew that were going to go Republican, states that were going to go Democrat, right? So we knew what California was going to do. We knew what the state of New York was going to do. And we knew what the Midwest was going to do. States like Indiana, states like Kentucky, states like West Virginia, states like Tennessee, Missouri, Arkansas, North Dakota, South Dakota, Montana, Idaho, Wyoming, Kansas, and even Nebraska. We knew what these states were going to do, Oklahoma and the like. But it was these battleground states where people were having a change of mind. And what is pushing that change of mind? This is very interesting. It's an interesting case study. I even said last night on our local news outlet, I think this is a race that we can develop many courses about, a race that we'll look back as some who are political scientists, some who are sociologists, some who are economists, some who are political pollsters are going to look back and say, this is an election for the ages. All of the nuances of this particular election. So we're going to look at that. And I'm telling you, I see a changing in the country where people that may not have liked Joe Biden and where he stands or Kamala Harris, but they dislike what this president represented, President Trump, and everyone in his cabinet so much that they voted for a new future. But what is that new future? What are your thoughts about the next 4 years? Do you think Joe Biden is the man for the time? Or do you think he's going to be spending a lot of his time just cleaning up the mess of the last 4 years of President Trump, both domestically and internationally? He's already said he's going to sign a litany of executive orders simply reversing all of the executive orders that President Trump signed and put into action, such as reversing the Dreamers decision, reversing the immigration decision, putting us back into the Paris Climate Accord, and the like. And these are just a few. These are just a few. But if you looked at the numbers a little closer in these battleground states, in 2016, it looks like the individuals that voted for Trump that normally would have voted Democratic and did not vote for Hillary Clinton simply changed their minds and turned back. Does that mean that these are individuals that are standing and holding and going to stay in the Democratic Party or support Democratic agendas? I don't think so. I think these are people that were looking for hope in 2008, 2012. Didn't really find it. And in 2016, there was someone speaking to their hurt, someone speaking to their economic issues, someone speaking to being able to have the opportunity in America that they simply just didn't have. And I think that's how Trump became president in 2016, but he didn't deliver on that. And of course, he caused a lot of chaos in the process. So these people turned back and said, we're going to give Joe Biden a chance. But what is that saying for our politics? What's that saying for our economic policies for the working man? Every day, if you're out there working, you're out there living check to check, what are your thoughts about the next 4 years? Do you think it's going to get better? Do you think that hope is knocking on the door? We want to hear from you. 757-823-9110. That's 757-823-9110. But another interesting aspect about this election was the number of people, not just that voted, but individuals or voted for the first time, but the registration of new voters, the grassroots effort. The grassroots effort was absolutely tremendous. Now, given the COVID-19 pandemic, there was, and again, when I talk about this election being a case study, this election being the opportunity to really study and see how our democracy works and how we galvanize voters who have never voted before and younger voters and build coalitions across the board. And we could take a look at the at the Lincoln Project, where you have Republicans who were moderates and centrists, whose primary purpose was to get Joe Biden elected and to defeat Trump and Trumpism. So 50% is done. So now, what about Trumpisms? We'll talk about that later. But the grassroots effort during the pandemic. Now, really, this was primarily because of the African-American vote. And more specifically, people are giving a lot of credit to Stacey Abrams, and we should, in Georgia, registering people to vote for years and finally got to this point. And also to push to register individuals to vote in other battleground states. But also the African-American voters. Let's talk about the impact of the African-American voters. Many times as African-Americans, we get a bad case when the Democratic candidate doesn't win. We say, oh, we didn't come out to vote. But research shows that African-Americans vote in a higher rate, over 60%, and at 65% during the time of President Obama, than any other non-white group in the country. So when people say black people don't vote, tell them the numbers say different. But again, we came out, and some people say, and the numbers don't lie, we saved the Democratic Party and the Democratic candidate again. The black vote in Michigan, the black vote in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, the black vote in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, the black vote in Atlanta, Georgia, pushed Joe Biden over, not to the 270, but over the 270. Think about that. That's the power of your vote, the power of one vote. So now that we pushed him over, right, is it time to get full value for our vote? There was a lot of criticism out there when people like Ice Cube and others were approaching candidates and the president with their contract for Black America and wanted to talk about economic upward mobility in America, saying that, for too long, we've been told promises. Oh, vote for us, and we'll do this and we'll do that. But every year, we're seeing more of our Black men and Black women incarcerated. Every year, we're seeing more drugs and guns coming to our community. Every year, we're seeing our schools become less and less funded. Every year, we're seeing a deterioration of our communities and dilapidation of homes in our schools and the like. Every year, we're seeing public works not come into our communities and give us the sidewalks, give us the biking trails, give us the jogging trails, give us the new streets in our communities. Every year, we get these promises. Every year, we see jobs leaving our community. Every year, we see the lack of economic investment in our community. Every year, we see the lack of Black businesses getting the opportunity that other non-white groups get in our communities. Every year, we get empty promises. But is this the time to get full value for our vote? And if we're going to get full value for our vote, how do we now secure it? Well, I got to agree with AOC. We got to demand these things now. We have to demand them, and we have to look at our agenda and forget about what other people say, because that's what the Republicans did, right? They got their Supreme Court justices on the bench, right? After denying President Barack Obama's nominee, Merrick Garland, after ignoring the hypocrisy thrown at them and cast at them over and over and over again because they pushed through Justice Barrett. Mind you, less than 30 days before the election of the new president. And this president appointed 3 Supreme Court justices. They ignored all that. They used the nuclear option, took it off the table, took the 2/3 off the table and said, listen, we just need 50 plus 1. And that's why the Senate runoffs in Georgia are so important. Right now, the balance of power, not just in the Senate, but also in our country, relies upon these Senate runoffs, these seats in Georgia. Think about that. The center of the political universe is in Georgia. So ATL, Atlanta, Savannah, and the surrounding areas is all on you. You're going to decide the balance of power. And how does that work? Yeah, the president is the one that signs bills. The bills start in the House. They have to be approved by the Senate. Then they go to the president for signing. That means the Senate can stop anything that comes out. And the only recourse is an executive order by the president. Because of the stalemate and the pushback and the misinformation during the Republicans during the time of President Barack Obama, President Obama had to use the executive orders a lot just to get things done. And President Trump did the same thing. But the power of the Senate is the ability to set the agenda of the country legislatively. And what do I mean by that? That means that there are bills that can come out of the House, which the Democrats control, come to the Senate, and they can stop. It's a stalemate. The power of the Senate is there, and it's in the balance. Now, when we talk about the power of the Senate and the agenda, what happens if there's a tie, a 50-50 tie? Well, if there's a 50-50 tie in the Senate, that means the most important power couple for the next 2 years in the United States government is Mitch McConnell and Chuck Schumer. They're going to have to discuss a sharing power agreement. Think about that. A sharing power agreement between two men that were deadlocked for the last several years. It can happen. This is how America works. It's about negotiation. It's about maybe you're not going to get everything you want, but you surely can get something if you want. But 757-823-9110. 757-823-9110. This is the presidential election show, and we want to know what's on your mind. What are your thoughts about the election? What are your thoughts about the ballots that are still being counted? Where do you think America goes from here? Do you think there is great optimism for the next 4 years of the presidency of Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris? Or do you think that he's going to spend a lot of time just cleaning up the mess? 757-823-9110. But back to the African-American vote, the black vote, as they call it in the political world. This is our time. Because if we don't get it now, when are we ever going to get it? We thought we would get it during President Barack Obama's time. And I've been one of the constructive criticism of President Barack Obama's time period. I thought he was one of the best presidents we ever had in the country. Understand when he was given, when the Bush administration, President Clinton handed President Bush an economy where we were paying off our deficit and we had a surplus. And then President Bush handed President Barack Obama a nation in a deep dive in the economy. He handed him a bailout that he signed, Bush signed. Wall Street got their money and the banks, and then he said, okay, now it's up to you. And Joe Biden and President Obama, they led our country back to financial prosperity. Toward the end of his presidency, our borrowing had gone down so much that we were back on track. And again, we had two potential pandemics that could have come into the country, SARS and Ebola. But under Obama and Vice President Joe Biden, it was stalled. The Office of Pandemic Infectious Diseases was opened in the White House to deal with these issues because we knew that these issues were going to come up more and more often. But as far as Black America, did we get full value for our vote for President Barack Obama? I don't think so. Matter of fact, the policies show that we did. But now we've got another opportunity. Now, definitely under President Trump, we didn't at all. And if anyone can say that we did, please call in. Let us know. But the policies just don't show it. Now, did HBCUs receive record number of funding and money? Absolutely, yes. But what about everybody else? And that's huge. That is huge. But a lot of those funds were also negotiated by the Congressional Black Caucus, the CARES Act, the additional stimulus funds that we received, and also private giving. Keep in mind, Black Lives Matter was one of the greatest galvanizing efforts of fundraising for African-American entities. Everyone saying, listen, we turned a blind eye to these issues for too long, and now it's time for us to admit it, start the framework to turn it around. And if you tell your story the right way, all you got to do is ask. There are people ready, organizations, institutions saying, listen, we want to help. But outside of that, African-American community suffered. African-American community suffered from the racist rhetoric and the hate speech by our president, who, mind you, is still in office. He's got about 60 plus days left, if I'm not mistaken. So he's on the golf course now for the second day in a row, and he plays golf every weekend. I remember they criticized Barack Obama, saying, oh, he's played golf more than any president. Well, that got shut down real quick. That rhetoric, that talk. And let's talk about the rhetoric in the Republican Party itself. Where do they go from here? I mean, the Republican Party was the party of values, Christian values, family values, low debt, small government. Okay. I think that went out the door. So how do they regain their message? Keep in mind, our debt has increased significantly, even before the pandemic. The tax cut that was given to the top 3% And if you're in the top 3% out there, call in. We want to know. What are your thoughts about that? But the tax cuts that were given to the top 3% cost the American taxpayer $1.2 trillion a year. You heard it. If you go back and take a look at how much we borrow after that tax cut, go back and take a look at the GAO, the Office of Accountability of our government. It shows that we borrow $100 billion per month to make up for the tax cut. It's all there. $100 billion a month after the tax cut. This is pre-pandemic. Now, with the pandemic, yes, we had to generate more funds. $2 trillion was pumped into Main Street and everybody else. But then $4 trillion was pumped into the stock market to bolster it up, right? But $100 billion, that's how much we borrow per month pre-pandemic in order to make up the shortfall from the tax cut. So President Joe Biden is going to have to take a look at that. He's going to have to reset. And it's not a raise of taxes, but it's resetting a common sense tax bracket where everybody pays their fair share. It only makes sense. It only makes sense. But let's get back to the Republican Party. If you're a conservative out there, we want to know, what are your thoughts? What are your thoughts about your party? What are the thoughts about the Republican Party, and where do they go from here? It's a party that compromised on the John Boehner with the Tea Party when he signed the agreement to keep power, when the Tea Party rose up again on a racist agenda. The birther movement, remember that? Remember Occupy Wall Street? Remember the birther movement that started? They were angry because they lost their jobs in corporate America. They didn't come back, and they needed to blame somebody. So they found this young man who was a senator in Illinois that was running for president, and they attached the Muslim message to him because of his name and said he wasn't born in this country. And then President Trump took that mantle and ran with it all the way into the White House. John Boehner made an agreement with those people to keep power under the Republican banner. That's one compromise. But then throughout this presidency of outgoing President Trump, they made other compromises. Compromise with fiscal responsibility. In other words, they became mute on it and became fiscal irresponsibility at the highest level. I remember when Budget Officer Mulvaney came into the White House, he wanted to cut SNAP programs. SNAP and school lunches. He wanted to cut that. Come on. It's food. Saying that we're not seeing the results in the ground. So you think hungry kids are going to actually study better? Doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. So they compromised there. They also compromised on the rhetoric of the president because they were afraid that he was going to send a tweet out against them. I've never seen so many grown people scared of a tweet in my life, but they were definitely afraid of it. Right now, we're going to do a recap of Senator Warner at NSU and his win for U.S. Senate. Keep in mind that Senator Warner came here when we talk about the black vote at NSU. He did a debate here. We hosted in our first time in our 85-year history, the only HBCU in the state to host a U.S. Senate debate. People came out, they supported, and he won a clear victory. Again, it shows the value of the black vote. So just not with President-elect Biden, but now with U.S. Senator Mark Warner. What are your thoughts about getting full value for our vote in the Commonwealth of Virginia? We want to hear from you. 757-823-9110. 757-823-9110. Again, we're talking about the election. This is the election show. we've got our next president of the United States, president-elect and vice president-elect of these United States, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. And look, let's go back to Kamala Harris, the senator, vice president-elect, HBCU educated. Think about that. And not just the HBCU educated for that pushed her across the line for vice president, but also the president that we have for Barack Obama. But now we have a caller. Caller, can you turn your radio down just a little bit for us? Turn your radio down just a little bit for us.
How about now?
Perfect. Caller, thank you so much for calling. This is Stay in the Water. You're on the air. What's on your mind?
I was thinking about what you were saying about the value of our vote. And we've been promised by the Democrats things to improve the black vote and, what we have given to the Democrats. They have been promising us promises ever since King last walked the earth, and nothing has come through for us. This time, Claville asked us to stand up and trust Biden. And Biden last night said that he owes the black people everything. Now, what I'm saying is that we as a black people, we have to stop just giving our vote away for nothing. When the Republicans call for something they want, their vote, they get it. They get whatever they want. But we as black people, we get nothing. We continue to get zero. SNAP programs and health programs, like I was telling my sister, I'm not really voting for myself. I'm voting for all the seniors in my family so they can keep their Medicaid, their Medicare. Because without it, like, for instance, my mother, she gets, without Medicare and Medicaid, her medical costs her $10,000 a month.
My goodness. Caller, tell me this. What else do you want to see? If Joe Biden came to you and sat down and said, what do you believe that the African-American community needs? What's that one thing, and we'll make it happen? What is that one thing you'll say to him?
We need better uplifting programs for our youth and our seniors. They ask us to get an education. I have a master's. But what good is a master's if you have another race of people oppressing you? Okay? You understand what I'm saying? I now have a big bill. Without the employment that, everybody keeps streaming, get educated. You get educated, but you get the bill, but you don't get the job to go with it to pay the educational bill. Caller,
thank you so much for calling.
You're welcome.
Well, listeners, you heard it. People are demanding full value for their vote. The caller just stated that right now she's voting not just for herself, but for others in her family. And I think that's the sentiment across the country, especially the African-American community. The way we came out, we were looking just not at now, but at the future. I have children, some of us have grandchildren, some of us have cousins and nieces and nephews and the like, and some of us are caretakers for them and caretakers for our parents. And we see the issues that are happening in our community. We're saying, you know what? It's time for us now to not just to get a handout, but we need a hand up. Many times individuals come and say, oh, I'll give you this or give you that. But it's better to be able to have the opportunity to create your own. I remember growing up, many of the African-American businesses, many of the businesses in my community were African-American owned. Not just the barbershop, but also the gas station and the attorney's office and also the little fixing shops, around the area where you go take your lawnmower, get it repaired and things of that nature. And then all of a sudden those started disappearing little by little. And then all of a sudden you see other groups in the community, utilizing the African-American community. But we have another caller. Caller, you're on the air. This is State of the Water. What's on your mind?
Well, first of all, is my radio okay?
Perfect. It's absolutely perfect.
All right. First, I'd like to say thank you to you guys, okay, the WNSB, for being able to even host, something like this. So, much kudos to you guys.
Thank you. Thank you.
I just recently turned 55 years old. I have served our country for 9 years proudly in the Army. I've had a Republican president. I've had a Democratic president. So I've seen the best and the worst of both worlds, especially being military. With that being said, I believe that if I had the opportunity to sit down and talk with President-elect and Vice President-elect, I would say that what we need as a people, ethnically speaking, is an administration that will, one, listen to what our real concerns are. The young lady before me, I believe she mentioned education for a little bit.
Yes.
And for our youth and for our seniors. But at the same time, I don't want us to always, as a people, be asking and asking and asking. Because typically, Democrats will just go ahead and give and not explain where it's coming from. And then the Republicans won't give it, to us anyway, or very little of it, and they don't explain. So I would ask the President-elect and Vice President-elect to be sympathetic, but explain to us how these things are going to happen. And also for us as a people, not just stand there for a handout all the time. Let's do something besides voting, because there are some people that vote and expect everything.
Yes.
And if you don't do anything else other than vote, which voting is crucial, it's huge. And thank everybody that did. Like you said, almost 175 million combined. But I believe that we need to stop complaining so much and put a hand in the ring, and let's fight for the same causes together with an administration that is sympathetic and sees us wanting to help.
Caller, I appreciate your call. And again, thank you so much for your service, and thank you for your support of WNSB and Norfolk State University and Stay the Water. Thank you so much.
All righty. Have a good day.
Now, the phone lines are lit up, 757-823-9110. If we don't get your call in, just keep calling back and we'll get it on the air. But we're seeing a phenomenal response to this program, to this topic, because it's very important to the community. It's very important to us to understand how government works for us. The last caller mentioned that he's a veteran. He's 55 years old. He's seen the best and the worst, Republican and Democrat. But it's time, as he stated, to start demanding, working toward that common goal. The previous caller also talked about voting for those programs in order to help our community. What else is out there? We have another caller on the air. Caller, if you could turn your radio down just a little bit for us.
Yes, it's down.
Yes, thank you so much, caller. You're on the air on Stay the Water. What's on your mind?
Yes, hi. My name is Shalette Covington, and I live in Norfolk, Virginia, and I'm a citizen and a concerned citizen. And the one thing that, first of all, I'm ecstatic about our win. And I say our, and I mean the American people in general, not just one faction. However, there are things that I'm very concerned about. One of the previous callers was talking about black folks and how our vote is, how precious our vote is, and the fact that a lot of times we don't get what we're supposed to get. Meaning we don't get our issues don't get the attention that's necessary. And there was something that had been in the news leading up to the election, and I think a few rappers, including Ice Cube, was talking to. I know, was talking to
President Trump.
President Trump, and was talking about the an agenda for Black America.
Yes.
Which, first of all, is nothing new, because of the fact that Tavis Smiley, years ago, used to have
Yes.
right after the what was it that
State
the
of Black
president,
America.
the president gives the
State
address
of
to
the
America.
Union. Yes, State of
And
the
then,
Union.
then Tavis would have the address for the agenda for Black America,
Yes.
basically. And he'd have that on an annual level. And he continued on with his platform to do what was called the Covenant with Black America.
Yes.
And so what Ice Cube actually was talking about was nothing new. It was simply what Tavis Smiley had put out there years ago, and we'd have all these different things. He'd have a think tank of all these different people
Yes.
that would talk about housing and economics and healthcare and all the different aspects that really
Right.
have an effect on the Black community.
So caller, we have a lot of calls coming in. I want to get everybody, but very quickly, is your main concern the economics of the Black community?
My concern is that basically all that we need to revisit that Tavis Smiley think tank of having an agenda, not so much an agenda like Ice Cube is speaking of, but basically he was talking about the same thing. He just went about it poorly.
Well, thank you so much, caller, for calling in and your support of Stay the Water.
Thank you.
Hello. Can you turn your radio down just a little bit for us?
Just cut it off.
All right, perfect. Caller, you're on Stay the Water. What's on your mind?
Well, I'm a Black man in Virginia, originally from Washington, D.C. I'm a student, and I'm just kind of blown away at how the Democrats think that the blacks just owe them their vote. The Democrats have really done nothing for Black folks in history. I mean, you just look back at it without water hoses and bombs and dogs. The Democrats have not stepped up to the plates. The Republicans have been more on Black folks' teams than the Democrats have, and I'm just trying to see. I mean, all you do is look at your history, and I'm just trying to see how what they've used to brainwash Black people.
Well, caller, tell me this: we've got another 2 months of President Trump, but we got 4 years coming up with President-elect Joe Biden. If he came to you and asked you, what is that one thing that you want to see for the African American community, what would it be?
That's a loaded question. First and foremost, finances.
Yes,
If
economics.
you don't talk about where we are financially due to slavery, you can't really get a grip on it. I can't even wrap my mind around what type of question I would ask that man, and for the most part, it would be moot because it wouldn't get addressed. We need to stop worrying about a Democrat or a Republican and get our own coalitions going where we don't need that type of thing.
Yes.
We need some new ideas, and I don't know. That's a very good question. I don't know what I would ask him because I don't have a lot of respect for him.
Well, caller, thank you so much for calling in to Stay the Water.
Thank you.
Listeners, I'm telling you, the phone lines have been lit up and the response has been tremendous. If we didn't get to you, call in again, 757-823-9110, 757-823-9110. We'll definitely do our very best to get you while we're on the air. But the last several callers discussed some very important issues regarding economics. The one caller mentioned the Tavis Smiley contract with America, and the other mentioned the economics. So with that being the case, one thing that I think is reverberating across our community, across our country and the cause, is that it's time to get paid. It's time for the economic interests of our country to pay attention to the Black community. Caller, if you could turn your radio down just for a second.
Okay, sure.
One caller mentioned the Tavis Smiley contract with America, and the other
Caller?
mentioned.
Thank you so much. Can you turn your radio down for us?
Sure.
How about that?
All right, perfect. Caller, this is Stay the Water. You're on the air. What's on your mind?
Well,
Well, my name is Bentley Montier. I'm the CEO of Bentley Montier Apparel. And here's my concern, and that I never hear from black people as a black person myself. The main issue is not Republican or Democrat. The problem with the black community as a whole is that we have not acknowledged as a unit who God is in this whole process. This is spiritual. It is not physical. And when we as a people realize that it's not about finances, it's not about reparations, it's about our faith and our absolute trust in God. God had already decided who was going to be president. He already decided that Trump was going to be in there. And he used him for his purpose.
Well,
now, the scripture, the Luke 14:11, speaks exactly of what has just happened.
Well, caller, listen, thank you so much for your call. We got other calls on the line, but we hear you that it's time, what you're saying, for the black community to recognize God, correct? All right. Thank you, caller, for calling in. Again, what is it that you're looking for the full value of your vote? We've got 4 years of President-elect Joe Biden and Vice President-elect Kamala Harris. And I want to go back to Kamala Harris again. Again, HBCU educated. Tremendous. Coming out of Howard University. Also, a member of the Divine Nine, Alpha Kappa Alpha. And the AKAs out there, call in. We want to hear your your enthusiasm, which I know you have. I know all of my family members have it, about the election of the first woman vice president of our country that just happens to be a part of your sorority. But not just that, but she was raised as a black woman. Keep in mind, her mother is a black Indian immigrant, or was, and her father, Jamaican, West Indian. And these individuals came to the country for education purposes. They met and they found a home together. And they found a purpose, especially during that time period in California, during the time period of civil rights. And there's a wonderful story about her mother moving her and her sister into a black community. And there was a woman from Louisiana that helped to raise her and raise her. She was like her grandmother. And she raised her as a black woman. And her mother told her, move to that community intentionally because she would be seen as a black woman in America. And I think that's a tremendous story that we can't forget. The value of people who come to this country seeking an opportunity, but also the value of people who are black from black nations coming and recognizing the value of African Americans in this country and wanting to be a part of our experience. I think that's a show. That's definitely another show. But we have to look at the value of that. So I think that what this election has shown is that you don't need a degree from Harvard, UPenn, Brown, Yale, to reach the highest office in the land, or the second highest office and one heartbeat away. Because one of the issues that we're looking at now is that Joe Biden this is an historical election because Joe Biden becomes the oldest elected president of the United States. He's 77 years old. And if he wasn't elected, it would have been Trump. Trump's not too far behind him. But he becomes the oldest president elected. So can he really operate at full capacity past his first term at 82 years old? Can he do it? Now, I know that 60 is the new 50 and 70 is the new 60, but is 82 the new 72? I don't know. Call in. Let us know that. But we're really now asking ourselves, are we looking at the first woman president and the first black woman president of the United States in 2024? And how tremendous that is, because everything that we've been through as a people and continue to go through, think about that. We've risen through it all. We've come out of it all. And we keep showing America, keep showing ourselves. Well, first of all, we know we can do it. But we keep showing America in the world the exceptionalism, the black exceptionalism in America as part of American exceptionalism. It's absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing. And what does this show our young black women? Now, I know a lot of times, and we're not going to get into this discussion, we're going to save that for another day, but how black women are portrayed in media and entertainment. But we've just had 8 years of a first lady, black first lady, Barack Obama's wife, Michelle Obama, Ivy League educated, lawyer, mother, who exemplified sophistication and what an African American, a woman who just happens to be African American, should be. I mean, with grace, sophistication across the board. And now we see another black woman rise up as vice president. And what she's going to show. She's already shown it as attorney general. She's already shown it as a U.S. senator. You know, say what you will. We'll talk about policies later. But we're just talking about character. We're talking about how you carry yourself. Everybody has shortcomings. Everybody doesn't make the best decision all the time. But the question is, how do you carry yourself and walk through and walk above and walk toward and walk forward? This is an absolutely phenomenal time in our country. At the same time, it was chaotic. We cannot forget about, and we got a short time here, so if you want to get your call in, 757-823-9110, 757-823-9110. We can't forget about these last 4 years. And really 5 years. Let's talk about 2015. That's when Donald Trump walked down the steps in Trump Tower, declared his run for presidency. And when he did that, he started talking this message. Unfortunately, I said, I believe this man is going to be president of the United States because he was talking to the heartbeat of America. It's the heartbeat of America. Keep in mind, the votes, they're not that far apart. Joe Biden's going to win by maybe 5 million votes, right? Now, when you talk, that's a lot of votes, but when you talk about a country of over 300 million people and about close to 70% of people who are eligible to vote actually registered and voted, that's a small margin. And we boil it down to the battleground states as we did in the beginning of the show. That's even much of a razor-thin margin of 1% and less than 1%. So that's the heartbeat of America. He spoke to those people. He normalized hate. He normalized, from the bully pulpit of the presidency, the worst of America that we as African Americans endured for 350 years outwardly. We're talking about 250 years of slavery, 100 years of Jim Crow. We saw it. And he brought it back up. He said it's okay to assault people. He told the police it's okay, rough them up, push their heads against the wall of the car when you're putting them in. He said it was okay to speak in a demoralizing way to people with disabilities when he talked about the reporter. And he said it was okay to say, send them back. He was okay when you heard kids in the lunchroom saying, build a wall, build a wall, build a wall. He said it's okay. It's okay. And we had grown men and women in the Senate and in the House that would not check him because they were afraid of a tweet. He told Ted Cruz his dad was possibly a part of the person that killed Kennedy. And Ted Cruz supports him. It baffles the mind. But that was part of the last 4 years. And we saw it up close and personal here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. We saw Charlottesville. We saw Unite the Right. We saw angry white males, and there were angry white females as well. Unite with the torches, tiki torch, on the grounds of the University of Virginia, and occupy Charlottesville for a weekend, saying death to blacks and Jews, saying that this is our country, saying Jews would not replace us, and someone literally taking their car filled with hatred, pressing the gas, and running into a crowd. And unfortunately, he maimed some, but unfortunately killed a young lady. This was the last 4 years. But it's not over, because we just had two men from Virginia Beach, this area where the Southampton roads, one from Chesapeake, one from Virginia Beach, drive to Pennsylvania, loaded with guns to, quote unquote, protect the vote. The misinformation. And I know we don't have time to get into the misinformation campaign that the president championed and continues to champion as it relates to this election. And he's going to be filing lawsuits. He's going to push his legal challenges for the vote. But hey, we've got to speak to that. Do we let these 70 million plus voters off the hook? Do we let the Republicans off the hook for the last 4 years of ignoring, enabling? Do we let them off the hook? Do we let the Democrats off the hook after saving, once again, the election? These are all questions that we have to answer. These are all very important questions for the next 4 years of our country. These are all major issues that we have to address. But one thing that we do know is that we're going to wake up, we're going to go to bed, and God will bless us to wake up again and see a new day. And the question becomes, what will that new day bring? It's going to depend upon you. Just like you galvanized and went to go register to vote, just as you galvanized and went to the polls, early voting, absentee voting, mail-in voting, it's the same way that we've got to galvanize and push forward in the days to come. The road to 270 was a major battle. And it was a major battle in battleground states. It was a major battle on the streets. It was a major battle moving forward. But what we have to do is continue moving on, continue fighting, because your vote matters, not just on election day, but your vote matters when policy is made. Continue to grassroots organize. Continue to be informed. Continue to talk to your neighbors, talk to your family. Continue to want better for your family and yourself, and demand the change that you want to see. Because this is not their country. This is our country. Our country, the United States of America. We helped build it, and we're going to help move it forward. So we thank you for listening to Say of the Water on the Presidential Election Show. And remember, this is your time.